In this video, I'm going to show you how to mix and process kicks. In this example, I'm using a trance kick, but the same basic techniques can be used for other genres as well. The kick is arguably the most important element in your mix. It's also usually the loudest element in your mix, so you'll want to make sure that it sounds as good as possible. The way you process a kick will vary on the genre and such. A kick used in a rap track will be very different from what a tropical house producer will use, but most of the same principles still apply when it comes to the processing. What many people fail to realize is that when they use kicks that come from quality sample packs, the kicks are already pre-processed, so in theory, you could just drag it in without doing anything at all. That said, every mix is unique, and the whole process is more about making the kick fit into your track. It usually takes some tweaking to get the kick to sound good in combination with the sub bass and the mix in general. You might find that the kick needs more body, or less, or perhaps it needs more attack, and so on and so forth. To determine this, you'll have to use your own ears, so let's jump straight into it. Here we have a fairly standard trance kick. It already has a nice attack as well as a nice and round low end to it. Let's just go ahead and add a simple sub bass as well. That way, it'll be easier to get the kick to sit right in the mix. Now, the first thing you want to do is to make the kick mono. The super low end should always be in mono. There are many reasons for that, but I'm not going to go into that right now. If you want to know more about this, then check out my tutorial about the importance of mono in your mix. You can find the link to the video in the description below. To make the kick mono, just slide this knob all the way up to the right. Now both channels are fully merged. If I turn it the other way, it does the opposite, adding more stereo separation. The first thing we'll look at is compression. I like to use the SSL compressor, but you can use any compressor for this. A compressor can be used to tweak the transient and punchiness of a kick. You typically want a somewhat slow attack to make sure that the transient is let through before the kick starts working. Then it's a matter of tweaking the kick so that you get it either as tight, crisp, or boomy as you prefer. Next, let's add an EQ. This is where many beginners get burned. Your first instinct is that bass is good, so naturally, the more, the better, right? The fact of the matter is that oftentimes we actually have to take out some of the low end in order to tighten up a mix. There's a limited amount of space in terms of frequencies, so you want to make sure you don't use up any of it needlessly, especially when it comes to the low end. What many beginners tend to do is something like this, boosting the low end to get more of that thump. Keep in mind, this eats up a substantial amount of space in the mix. You might get away with this if it's a simple rap track with a few elements, for example, but in a busy mix with more frequencies, this kind of EQing will inevitably cause problems. You're massively boosting frequencies that not even a subwoofer is able to reproduce. It will still try though, but it can't, and that causes all kinds of problems. The way you EQ your kick will depend on the genre as well as the sub-bass. Most people want a really deep and punchy kick, and a deep and rumbly sub-bass at the same time. The reality, though, is that you usually have to make a compromise. You often have to choose to go with either a deep kick and a lighter sub or vice versa. For example, if you have a kick that goes all the way down, you might want to consider rolling off your sub bass at 40 or 50 Hz or so to free up some space for the kick. In this case, I know I'm going to end up with a busy mix, so I want to make a cut at 30 Hz or so. Most speakers can't reproduce anything below 50 Hz anyway, and few subwoofers go much lower than 22 Hz. Even though we're rolling this off, there will still be plenty of low frequencies left, so it won't be a problem when it's played on a big system that can go really low. If this was a tropical house track, I would perhaps roll it off as high as 60 Hz. But this is a trance kick, so we actually want to keep most of the low end in there. Let's add a slight boost at around 80 Hz. This is usually a sweet spot as well as the 60 Hz area. This will depend a bit on the kick itself and the key of the track, so use your ears. As I said before, the 60 and 80 Hz area is quite important. This is usually considered to be a sweet spot and is often boosted by hi-fi speaker manufacturers. There's usually a nasty resonant frequency somewhere between 100 and 200 Hz. So I'm going to make a spike and sweep across and try to find it. Right around there, I think. I'm just going to take some of that out in order to clean up the sound a bit. This will allow that the nice low end comes through better. The next thing I'm going to do is make a little dip in the mid-range. This will free up some of the space for the mid-range in my track, like vocals and such. Then I'm going to boost the high end slightly to help the attack of the kick. Now let's check to see how it sounds with and without processing. As you can hear, the changes are subtle, but this will make a huge difference in the final mix. Again, keep in mind that some of these adjustments, like the compression, may have to be tweaked later on so that the kick fits nicely in your overall mix, and especially the sub. Another thing you should pay attention to is the key of your track, because a kick that is in the same key of the track usually sounds better. Sometimes you get lucky and the kick will match perfectly instantly, but usually it won't. I'm going to use a free plugin called G-Tune. I actually have another video dedicated to this plugin, so if you want to know more about how to use it and where to get it, then you can check out the link to that video in the description below. As you can see, the kick is leaning heavily towards G sharp and A. The last thing I want to show you is how to tighten up the kick and the low end in general. It sounds really good right now, but that's going to change once we start adding a lot of instruments to our track. You want to make sure that there's not too much overlap between the kick and the bass. There's several ways to do that. You can go to the channel rack and load up the kick and use this knob to shorten the tail of the kick. It will also affect the body, so make sure you don't take out too much. You can also use the envelope settings. You typically want to do this while the sub is playing. When they both seem to tighten up, that's the sweet spot. The third method is to use a transient shaper. This works much like a compressor, but it's much simpler to use. You basically have the attack and release. The attack will increase the transients, making it snappier, and the release will increase or decrease the body and tail, making it more or less boomy. We can use the release setting to tighten up the kick if there's too much overlap between the kick and the bass. Let me know in the comments below what you thought of this video. And if you want us to make more videos like this, showing you how to mix and process various elements in a mix. I'd like to thank our Patreons for their ongoing support, and as always, if there's any specific tutorial you'd like us to make, or if you have a question, just let us know in the comments below. Also, make sure to check out the links below if you need feedback on your music, mixing, mastering, and so on. Thanks for watching.